Hi, welcome to this edition of It's Cyber Up North. I am Thea Scott, and today we are talking all things space and cybersecurity. And to join me, we have Ed Bartlett here, who is the CEO of Hicomply. So welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. Obviously, busy week being in lots of areas,
Yeah.
particularly on the football front.
Yes, I have noticed your jumper.
Yeah, I'm wearing the magpie in honour.
Absolutely should do, yes.
You spotted that?
Yes.
Right, but thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Lovely. Well, I'm excited really about this. It's kind of a new area, I think, really, that we're looking into here. I think probably the first thing maybe we need to have a look at or address here is, I think when people think about space, they're thinking more about rockets, planets, stars, our sun, etc., whether Pluto is a planet or not. But what does it have to do with cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think probably a couple of years ago, I probably would have had the same view of what space consists of. And interesting, we went to an event down near Cheltenham last year with the CyberNorth team, and there was some very interesting perspectives presented around cybersecurity and risk. And I think those conversations are really what started to open my own mindset. So it's probably fair to say that we've only really been looking hard into this for about a year, off the back of what's been developing in the industry. And I think what really was critical for me, and the trigger to take this seriously from a cyber point of view, and also the opportunity, is you look at space as an industry. It's something like a £19 billion globe, UK industry. But interestingly, in the UK, I think the government figures, latest figures, suggest there's something like 50,000 people working in this industry in the UK. Something like 1,800 businesses, organisations spread all across the UK. But what's really interesting, of that 1,800 businesses, something like 1,200 have got less than £1 million in turnover. So what it highlights is, two things. Is a lot of the businesses that are working in the space industry are relatively small. Many of them are SMEs. Many of them are contributing components, parts, software. They provide a piece of the bigger jigsaw that is space. There's very few organizations that do everything. The big sort of multinational businesses that we know, Lockheed Martin or British Aerospace, those sort of big players in the market are relatively unique in terms of their number. Okay. Most of the activity in the industry is coming from smaller businesses. And why that's critical from a cyber point of view is that presents a very distributed ecosystem. And in very distributed ecosystems, you have risks because there's a lot of interconnections between all those different organizations. Some people call this supply chain risk. And from a cybersecurity point of view, if you have a bad actor, so to speak, who wants to create a cyber threat or a vulnerability, or exploit a vulnerability, often that's through the supply chain. And so therefore it is important that market understands that the risks aren't necessarily at the top of the tree. They're certainly probably more likely to be down across the supply chain. So that's one side of it, kind of the market dynamics. The other thing that really made sort of us interested in it was also the kind of the tech side of it. And you look at the space industry as it is today, a lot of it is related to what's going on in the world of satellites. There are thousands and thousands of satellites going into what gets called the near Earth orbit, the close to Earth satellite infrastructure, like what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink. And there are many others. That technology is small tech. This isn't big rockets being fired up into space. These are small satellites, often going up maybe going up that way, but also going up different ways. And satellites are such a fundamental part of our economy now. And there was a recent publication that kind of put a sort of question. what do we think would happen if the satellite network went down? And most people probably don't understand how severe that might be. And I don't know if that's something we want to get into, but
Well, I think it's important because actually I think, when we talk about space, if not people thinking that it's more about rockets, and then we move into a little bit more of this information and we talk about the satellite side of stuff, actually, I think sometimes we think about cybersecurity being quite a sort of, I don't know whether it's sort of a niche market maybe that people think about, or maybe it doesn't affect them. But actually what you're talking about here is a lot of infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, let's explore it a little bit.
It's quite. When you think about it, it's you see these everybody's fan of the sort of the Netflix style, post-apocalyptic world that you live in. Like if the satellite networks went down, and which cyber attack could ultimately cause, we'd be talking about phones being down, TV being down, the banking infrastructure being down, energy providers not being able to do what they do in the space of energy. So we'd be out without money, without transportation networks, you name it, trains, everything that we do today survives on the back of communications. And the communications network is delivered predominantly through satellites. Very, very little is outside that satellite network today. So audio, video, and that's a cross globe thing. I mean, that it would be unlikely that it would only impact the UK, but yeah, the world we're in at the moment, there are challenges and there are conflicts, and there is a perception that that side of space is potentially a weak link if we don't really manage the cybersecurity risks associated with it. So yeah, and the thing that when I talk to people who work in this area, the technological challenge of that is that these are satellites that are being put into space and they've got like a 15-year lifespan. So the protections to manage those vulnerabilities have to be thought about when those devices are being designed, and need to be protected all the way through the design and manufacture and installation process. So it's something that has to be thought about over a very long period of time as well, and start very early in the life cycle of the IM. So yeah,
so kind of talking about secure by design really here, so we have to shift left for that side of things, because if we've got 15 years there, they're going to become a bit more vulnerable as technology gets better, as cyber criminals, if they want to. And we do live in a world where this will be happening, especially even on a sort of more political, national, there are state-sponsored, type attacks as well. And if we're talking about critical national infrastructure, which is what you're talking about really here, that, we need to put that secure part of it in from the very beginning, not just patch as we go.
Absolutely. And you can see them kind of crossover. I mean, obviously going to events in the space sort of arena and the defense arena and cyber, what you're seeing is a real overlap of activity and understanding of risk across that. I think there's a very clear alignment now between, the defense industry and the space industry. They are effectively interlinked. And I think cybersecurity is seen by both the space sector and the defense sector as a fundamental part of what they do. It's not another thing, it's just part of what they do.
Yeah.
So I do think it's that highly distributed, as you said, lots of technological developments and enhancements happening all the time. It's a rapid industry, and there's a lot of really clever businesses, particularly in the Northeast, who are doing some really, really great work in this space. And when we talk to them, they do express a concern about cybersecurity.
Okay, so the conversations really are being had there. There's a lot of opportunities here for our businesses in the region as well to be able to tap into the space industry and to be able to offer services really there. Definitely,
I think, and that whether the company is manufacturing a physical component or a part, or whether they're producing some software or analytics, and that's the really nice thing about the space industry is it's so diverse. It's people doing transmission systems for sort of communications. There's software. There's back end. There's just even the reflective materials that are being installed in satellites. There's so many companies that are producing little parts of that jigsaw, as I called it before. So yeah, I think they're all looking to get into a position where they can win contracts as well here. So this is the other key thing is it's also coming. The cybersecurity pressures are coming from the businesses that are buying their products into their supply chain. So it's they're doing it because there's a perceived risk and they need to manage that, but they also know they won't win a contract with a prime contractor or a customer if they're not seen as trustworthy from a cybersecurity point, and that's kind of where we come into play.
Okay, so I was just going to ask you about that as well. So obviously you mentioned that we had done a trade mission last year down to Cheltenham, which is when I presume the first time really that space came onto your radar. There's a lot of puns in this in this podcast. So that'd be really interesting. One, to talk about that, but also I think to talk about what you're how you're sort of going about getting into that and the opportunities that you think there, because obviously we talked about like the SME side of things and the opportunities really, I suppose, in terms of those other businesses being secure as well, and that sort of supply chain side of things. So let's talk about first how it came across onto you guys, and you guys spotted that. What was it that really sort of jumped out at you and you thought, yes, this might be something we want to explore further?
Yeah, there was two things at that specific event, and obviously we've been to other events in this region, but I think that it was clear that the space community down in the southwest is very mature. It's obviously lots of activity in that part of the world. There was a couple of talks that were very much around risk assessment, the cyber risk assessment of the space assets. So in that context of, in the world of space, there are you've got everything from launching to communications, and there's been some very detailed work done through the National Space Agency that's looked at the risks across the whole kind of asset base in space, that was a piece of work that was just being published at that time. So that was something that was an immediate sort of, hey, this is interesting because we have a cybersecurity risk assessment model built in our product, and we hadn't found anything up until then that could help us build a risk assessment that would be relevant to a space customer, an organization in the space sector. So we spotted kind of, I guess it's content, data, it's knowledge that we could kind of use and reposition in our product. But the second thing was talking to companies that were saying, look, we're struggling to win business in this space because we're getting these really complicated security questionnaires from very high-end government organizations, who are saying that we need certain certifications, we need to see that you've got certain security controls in place. So very, very comprehensive requirements around cybersecurity. So we obviously then took those two requirements away and obviously developed our offering around this.
Okay, yeah. So that's quite interesting because I kind of, when we sort of first started talking about sort of space and the opportunity for cybersecurity and maybe like the businesses up here and where like Hicomply would be involved, I was sort of thinking you'd almost be offering your services or products sort of direct to the consumer almost. But actually what you're saying here is it's more about the people who are building the products or the services directly to the consumer. You want to be talking to them because as you said, a lot of them are SMEs.
Absolutely.
So they don't have a cybersecurity function, department, skill set in-house potentially, and that's that where you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the very best are spin-outs from universities.
Okay.
They're academic teams that have built amazing products, so they're not really. They don't have somebody in their team who understands cybersecurity controls and how to build a framework around that. And that's no different in any other sector we work in, to be fair. But yeah, it's come back to that point of, 1,200 of those firms in the space are relatively small. So the primary opportunity that we've seen is around exactly that. So it's businesses that, in order to win a position in the space supply chain, selling in their widget or their product or their service or their software, whatever it might be, they need to answer a set of questions when they're bidding for work, and they'll typically be sent a questionnaire that will say, do you have the following certifications? And we help them get those certifications in place. The questionnaires also will challenge them somewhat on policies, procedures, risk assessments. So we give them the tool sets to be able to, to build a framework to prove that they are following industry best practice. And typically in the space sector, historically, the main standard, if you like, has been the US NIST standard. That's been the that's kind of the de facto standard, and that's mainly because most of the space industry follows what's happened in the defense sector. Okay. So in defense, and particularly in the NATO sort of defense ring, if you call it that, most of the security controls people work off are based on the US NIST standard. But what we're seeing is a change and a shift, in that we're seeing a move to the UK having its own, very much its own approach to cybersecurity. Okay. And you'll see this come through this year with the Cyber and Resilience Bill, which hasn't yet landed through Parliament, but it's due to come in this Parliament. That legislation will land, and as part of that, it very much talks about the requirement for UK businesses to be resilient and to have a minimum standard of governance and control around cybersecurity. And the UK government is very much pushing its own agenda here. So through the National Cybersecurity Centre, we're seeing the new CAF, the CAF framework.
What the CAF is, just.
Yeah, I mean the CAF is effectively the UK's answer to cybersecurity governance. It's the cyber assessment framework. It's actually been around for a few years, but it's been evolved now, and ultimately being pushed across all areas of government procurement, government funding, industry. So critical asset infrastructure and particularly in energy and nuclear, infrastructure, housing, NHS, healthcare, across into other sectors.
Okay, so it's for the public sector, basically, the government look after, that you need to be a certain standard have a certain standard of security if you're going to work in that.
Absolutely. So that's kind of coming in through different ways, through the legislation that's coming through, but also National Cybersecurity Centre is very much making sure that, I think the UK has often adopted standards from outside the UK or international standards, and I think it's appropriate, I think, at this time that we have our own benchmark of what good cyber posture resilience looks like. Okay.
And space and defence is going to be part of
absolutely
of that.
So I mean, I think they'll kind of be I expect it will be twin track, that the industry, because there's a strong US overlap with a lot of the key suppliers. NIST will always be a core standard, but what we're looking to, what we've done with CAF is we've mapped all the security controls between NIST and CAF, so that an organisation, if they want to get themselves ready for this sector and be seen as being secure from a governance standards point of view, we would always say, certainly going forward, we'd suggest looking at NIST and CAF as a combined sort of framework, and possibly even layering some of the principles of ISO 27001. But there's a lot of commonality across them. But yeah, I think there's a movement from central government, and ultimately a lot of the space industry is funded through government programs. Okay. So they're starting to prioritize it really now. I'd say so, and I think other sectors probably were kind of ahead of the curve a little bit on security for obvious reasons, like the nuclear industry.
Mm-hmm.
You'd expect to be one step ahead.
Yeah.
Energy in particular is very much down the track on this. But the space industry has always been significantly aware of this. But I think it's evolving. But it's evolving because there's an understanding that an SME isn't necessarily going to have the same resources and skills to do what a British Aerospace would do in this area. So I think there's an understanding that we've got to make it lean and efficient for SMEs to deal with cybersecurity. They've got to still put the right thorough frameworks in place, but it doesn't have to be as complex and as expensive maybe as it has been in the past.
Okay.
So a big part of what we're trying to do is to make it cost effective, make it easier, so that they're not having to employ 5 people to make sure cybersecurity is being handled properly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And I suppose obviously with like the geopolitics developments that we have going on at the moment in 2025, they probably, in terms of that sort of defence and space side of things, they probably are going to ramp that up a lot more as well.
All right, it's interesting. I was at a defence event in the Northeast just recently, and what was really interesting is that there was talk about obviously the whole defence strategy is kind of changing, going back to thinking about us having land forces again. But on the flip side of that, there was a real kind of steer that we've got to make our our UK businesses resilient, and cybersecurity is a key part of that. So I think this is about making UK businesses resilient in the critical areas that matter, and space, without doubt, is right up there. If our space industry, particularly satellite network, isn't secure from a cybersecurity point of view, it will, as we said before, it will have a significant impact on everything else we do as an economy. So, it's a great opportunity. I think it's a good time to be in cyber from that point of view. But like I said, I think small, medium-sized businesses working in the sector shouldn't be scared of it, because I think the technology and the tools that are coming into the market now really do make it more manageable than maybe it was even 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's actually quite an exciting opportunity really for regional businesses that we've got here in cybersecurity, that this is an industry which people should probably be exploring a lot more.
Definitely. And I think, from both a supplier point of view, but also I think large end customers looking to bring SMEs into their supply chain can now start to be comfortable that they can, that buying a small SME into the supply chain isn't a risk to them. It shouldn't be seen as a risk anymore, because these businesses can actually be on top of cybersecurity in a way which perhaps even some of the larger businesses aren't able to do.
Can do it.
So I think it's if thought about and handled early, there's always going to be a risk, but certainly a big opportunity.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, what a good note to end on. Thank you very much, Ed. This has been very informative. I think we probably could speak about this for a long, long time. If you would like to know more about it, you can obviously contact us, visit our website. You can contact Ed as well. We will be having more discussions, I think, and more blog posts and articles that we can also send your way about space and the further opportunities there are there. And for everything else, as always, you can visit our website, which is cybernorth.biz. And this podcast you can get on all the places that you find your podcasts on. So just to say thank you very much to Ed, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Thea.